I recall different conversations I've had with, people in the past. They would speak about their jobs, and basically it's who they are. So that is where more or less their identity is from. Uh, they think of themselves as the main breadwinners for their families. And so all of that is wrapped up more or less in, their identity and what they do. And, that can really, if you allow it, that can have negative consequences to it. So you're probably like, what do you mean? Well, I'll get to that eventually because it's very important that, see, I'm basically more or less focusing on, you know, a Christian's identity. Now, people of the world, their their identity is going to probably most likely be in that same position as their job. That's where they're going to find their identity at, and it's wrong until they come to know Christ. Because when we come to know Christ, we are not who we were. We have a new identity. We're a new creation. So if we're a new creation, then that means that everything has changed. God has changed things. He is now our Father, and we are God's sons and daughters. And if you recall when Jesus, after he resurrected, he said to Mary Magdalene, he said, "Don't take hold of me because I have not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and your brethren, and, you know, to my God and your God." So right there, he showed that our redemption was then secure, and we then are children of God. So in this video, I really want to focus and change, people's identity, show them the thinking that is wrong, and how, men's jobs aren't who they are. And I'll give reasons why. So this leads then into the title of this video, and the title is called "What You Do Is Not Your Identity." Now, many people think that their identity is in their jobs, and I have already stated that at the beginning. And, like I said, man being the main breadwinner. And, I really think, you think about it, it really seems like that thinking has been around. It looks like it's universally agreed, not only in the world, but in the church, that the man is the source. The man, everyone looks to the man. And so man then has a bunch of responsibilities heaped up on his shoulder. And, for the longest time, ever since my faith walk started, the whole concept of man being the source has really bothered me, because there was something about it that just didn't seem right until God taught me that it isn't right, that man claimed to be the source from the time, from, the earliest times. And, there a change did take place in the garden where, man, ate of the tree that God told him not to. So independence started, independence from God. So man then has the responsibilities of trying to make it on his shoulders. And, the whole concept of the breadwinner models, hasn't always been around. It had started more or less in the latter part of the 1800s. And so it seemed like, that thinking spread in Europe, it spread in the United States, and so therefore the man is the source. And I have, part one and part two of the main breadwinner in my videos for you to see, and it's historical information. And, it's really eye-opening, because I don't want to divulge too much information. I want you to check it out for yourself. But I'll just say, it's eye-opening in the fact that, you know, this thinking hasn't always been around. So if it hasn't always been around, then this thinking can be changed. And, my biggest problem with the whole main breadwinner is the negative effects that can come from it. And the last thing I want to see is my fellow brothers and sisters taking on responsibilities on their shoulders apart from God. And that the whole main breadwinner thinking seems like it has been ingrained in everybody. That thinking is passed down, generation after generation. And, the thinking is passed down onto boys. They're pushed to be the main source for their family. They have to get a good education, to get a good paying job, so that they can provide for their family. And so, man has so much pressure on his shoulders. And if the unforeseen happens, like he loses his job or whatever, then, he feels bad, and he feels like this whole world is coming down on him and that he's got to do something for his situation. So they think that, being the main breadwinner is who they are. So their occupations and what they do is falsely their identity. And, I'll get into it later of how that thinking is wrong. And like I said, they are bound by their expectations and responsibilities. They have to do this and to do that for the approval, not only of their families, but on the people that are witnessing their situations. If you're marrying a man's daughter who is all about, financial success, then you have to more or less, jump through their hoops of expectations to receive their approval. You have to have in place what this world says you have before you can marry his daughter, because he doesn't want his daughter, facing, worry or anything like that. And I had a video on that thing in showing how that thinking is wrong. That if you're trying to keep more or less your wife from experiencing any grief or anything, and if she's a Christian, how is she then growing in Christ? How is she getting stronger in her faith in the Lord if you're shielding her from, problems? It's something that everyone needs to face together, and for them to become stronger. Another expectations and responsibilities is the whole fact that if a man works, he needs to work overtime, to pay all his bills, to pay mortgage on time, to pay rent on time, having a good running car, having money saved up for contingencies, whatever it might be that this world has put on his shoulders. And like I said, the man is the source in this world. So the downside of man being the source is the fact of, what if he goes into work one day and he finds out he doesn't have a job? Then he's at that place to where his family can no longer depend on him. So the identity that he had placed in his job and more or less ingrained in who he is then lost. So what does a man do in that predicament? So he's then forced to look for another job, and he has to constantly look, and in pride he will not receive any help. So his dependence on that job has been shaken. So therefore, his family is looking to him to find something so that they don't worry, so that they don't face problems. So, how many men committed suicide because they could no longer fill the shoes of provider? And if you recall the movie Sling Blade, if you've seen it, I recall Frankie, the little boy was talking about his dad and how he shot himself after leaving a note. Well, yeah, after leaving a note, he shot himself. And his note stated that he tried the best that he could. And, you know, the little boy said that his dad was trying to work odd jobs. And, he thought that they were getting along fine. But his father felt like he failed them because he couldn't provide it like he wanted to. So that is the downside of man, depending on his job to get by. You know, for a man to think that's who he is as being the source, is what the problem is. And, I want to bring this to a conclusion so that if anybody has the mistaken notion that what they do is who they are, I want to bring you to, the real correct thinking about where your identity is. So if a man loses his job, are they then considered useless? Not only by his family, but by people who are looking at their situation. If you've seen the show Home Improvement, I don't know if you recall about, Tim's, shop teacher, Art Leonard. You know, Basically what was said about his shop teacher was that when he shook people's hands, that, his grip was so hard that, it would, crush anybody's hand. But since he developed arthritis, he didn't have the grip like he could, like he did. And, he used to be able to make toolboxes. He used to be able to cut the metal, but because of the arthritis, he couldn't do it anymore. And so, on Tool Time, Tim was with a bunch of his old, shop students, and Art's old students. And, it was Tim's fellow students, I should say. So they were at Tool Time. Everyone was at their respective tables, and they were cutting metal by Art's instruction. And so, after, Tim's encouragement at his house, telling him that he could do it, Art went for that. He was trying to cut the metal, and he couldn't because of his arthritis. So when he put his scissors down to walk away, only to come back, Tim got a hold of the scissors and said, okay, we're going to make this cut. And so Art was offended. He went to him and he said, don't you dare try to tell me that I can't do something. And Tim's like, I don't want you to be embarrassed. And his teacher's like, a little late for that, so he walks off set. So he was offended because he couldn't do things like he could before. And so, Tim was talking with his neighbor Wilson about it. And Wilson said that unfortunately society defines men by what they do. And Tim's like, I like being called Tim the Toolman Taylor. And so Wilson was like, well, what if you can't be called the Toolman anymore? And so Tim was like, oh, that's horrible. I feel like who I am is gone. And, so Wilson reminded Tim that of what was truly important. He is a great husband, a great father, and he was showing them the things that really mattered, not, what he couldn't do anymore. So, and likewise, if you're watching this and you had the thinking that you're the identity, your identity is found in your job, then I want to move you away from that, because you are more than what you do. It could be very well that your job was taken away so you can change this mindset to know who your identity really is in. And I will get to that soon. And I recall a guy from, my church who was talking about, how his identity was in his work. And, so many people have that thinking. And it's the wrong thinking. And it, for the reasons that I had already specified about what if, somebody loses their job, they lose who they are, so then they're lost. I want to think of, a more, I wanted to make it more personal, that about my identity. Now, my identity is basically not what I do. I love doing graphics. I love doing many other things, but that doesn't define who I am. If people only looked at me about what I did, then they're missing who I am. It's like going to church, right? And somebody walks up to you, they don't get in a conversation with you, they just ask you to do something. So they're dismissing basically who you are. And who I am is Robert Shipley. My dad was named Robert, and my mother's name was Barbara. So I am my father and mother's son, but that's not all who I am. I am somebody, that, loves to be around friends. I like to laugh. I like to watch movies. I like to, it, basically, if you want to know who I am, then you need to spend time with me. So ask my friends. They can tell you exactly who I am. It's not by what I do in which people will know my identity. It's by spending time with me. And so, we are not defined by what we do. We are who we are because of, you know, you know, who our parents brought into this world. So if you are a Christian, your identity is no longer in what you do. If you're a cosmetologist, if you're a carpenter, if you're a graphic designer, whatever it might be, that's not who you are. If you are a Christian, your identity is found in God. God is your father. You are a child of God, and that says it in 1 John chapter 3 and Galatians 3:26 to 29. Like I said, your identity is found in God. So it takes changing your mindsets, that when you get a job, that you need to realize that, it is what God has given you. If God agrees with you having this job, and if you've sought him and heard his voice and he led you into doing so, then that is not who you are. You have the job to be able, to pay bills or whatever, to take care of your needs. But if you lose the job, you don't lose who you are. Your constant dependence will then be on the Lord. So it takes changing that mindset that you have learned from the world, walking away from it and, coming to terms with the fact that your identity is found in God. And if it takes getting in the mirror and saying, I am a child of God, over and over again, do so. Because whatever it will take you away from, that mindset that you are, your job is who you are, you got to do it. So you got to stop thinking you are the source. You are no longer the main breadwinner for your family. God is your main breadwinner. And if God allows you to have that job, then he's given that to you. But you can't get to that place of pride thinking that, you're it. You know what I mean? So, I have those videos about the main breadwinner. And, check throughout my videos. If you're new to, my videos, then check the videos that will apply. And I pray that they bless you. So it takes walking in a new way, and very important is to know God as your source, so that if you do lose your job or whatever, that you can, remain in that place of dependence on him. So in closing, don't define yourself by what you do, but it's a job that you are working for God. So whenever you do go to your job, you're working for him, not for anybody else. So I just want to end it here, and I pray that this video has blessed you and encouraged you. And, I don't want you walking in that place of you being the source. And don't let anybody put that false identity on you. you are a child of God. And if you don't know God, then, you know, check out my videos. I have plenty of videos that can, encourage you for you to know, what is the true thinking. And if you don't know God, just ask him in. I mean, just say, because Jesus did come to seek and save the lost. With his blood, he has redeemed mankind. But his sacrifice and his death and resurrection was for you to come to know him. So, just ask him in. Say, Jesus, thank you for dying for me. Lord, I ask that you would forgive me for my sins and that you would save me. Just something along those lines, and he'll do that. But don't stop there. Check out my other videos. Find a good church that you can worship at. Find a Bible that you can understand. I would, recommend Amplified Bible. I would recommend a New American Standard Bible, or, New Living Translation. Whatever will help you to understand. So check them out on BibleGateway.com. You can see different translations and, find one that is going to help you. And so, the churches that I have attended in the past that has really helped me were more or less non-denominational churches. So, just ask God in and he will lead you. And so, if you're new to my videos, check out from video 00 and work your way up. I have plenty more. And at this time, I really need to update the numbers because I've added a bunch of videos. So I'm going to end it here. Thank you for taking the time to watch.